Hello everyone, this is Bob and Threadbare and welcome back to Threadbare Reviews. Well, it's occurred to me that it's been a while since the last Witcher book review, and we're getting pretty deep into the game. And so the time has come to look at the fifth book in the series and the third novel, Baptism of Fire. Like before, we'll be skipping the author section, so let's get into it. The review. The Second Nilfgaardian War has been raging for several weeks, and when Geralt hears that the Empire has Ciri, he knows he has to head south to find her. However, to get south, he has to cross the Yaruga River, which is currently the active front of the war. But while Geralt wants to travel alone, he's joined on his quest by Dandelion, a bard and Geralt's oldest friend, Milva, a human archer who helps the druids of Brokilon and is often mistaken for an elf, Zoltan Chive, a dwarf who leads a small band of dwarves, gnomes, and human refugees, and Regis, a higher vampire who is sworn off blood and instead works as a provincial healer and surgeon. Geralt is also sort of joined by Cahir, the Nilfgaardian soldier who is tasked with capturing Ciri and who will be tortured and executed for his failure if he ever goes back home. Geralt doesn't like Cahir, but he eventually begins to respect him. This fellowship breaks for a time when they reach a refugee camp, which the Nilfgaardians raid, and then the Temerians counter-raid. The Temerians capture Geralt and threaten to hang him, but Regis busts him out and the group continues along the river without Zoltan. They then try to cross the river using a smuggler's ferry, but when Nilfgaardian and Lyrian forces show up on both sides of the river, they cut the ferry rope and float downstream. Things get complicated after that, but ultimately, Geralt and Cahir end up leading a group of Lyrian soldiers in the defense of a bridge, and afterwards Queen Meve of Lyria and Rivia rewards Geralt with a knighthood. So Geralt of Rivia, who is only of Rivia because he has to say he's from somewhere, becomes Sir Geralt of Rivia officially. Meanwhile, Ciri is settling into her new role as Falca, a member of the bandit group the Rats. She enters a relationship with another of the Rats, a girl named Missile, and she fully embraces the death and revelry the group engages in. However, the Nilfgaardian Secret Service is aware of Ciri's current location, and because they want to overthrow the Emperor, they hire a bounty hunter, Leo Bonhart, to kill her and the rest of the Rats. But that's all that happens to her in this novel. Finally, a group of female spellcasters led by Philippa Eilhart gather together to form a new secret society, the Lodge of Sorceresses. Their members include Northerners, Elves, and Nilfgaardians, but is exclusive to women, and their goal is to ensure that magic is as fully represented as it deserves to be. Specifically, they want to turn the Kingdom of Kavir into a new Northern Empire, one that can balance out the power of the Empire of Nilfgaard. And to ensure that it respects magic, they want to find Ciri and marry her off to the Kavirian king. To aid in this, they invite Yennefer to join their ranks, and in the process, we find out that Yen was captured on Thanet by Francesca Findabair, who is now also known as Enid Angleana, the new queen of Dol Blatana. However, during the first full meeting of the Lodge, Yennefer escapes, and she begins her search for Vilgefortz, whom she is convinced is currently holding Ciri captive. So as you can probably guess from the summary, at this point the three main protagonists have separated and are on their own independent adventures. The primary protagonist, at least for this book, is Geralt, but we constantly cut away from Geralt's story to find out how things are going on in other parts of the world. This is fine, of course, and it's a well-used storytelling device, but at the same time, I feel like Sapkowski was using this book to experiment with cutaway conceits. Let me explain. Sometimes when we cut to Ciri, it's because Geralt is dreaming about what she's doing, but other times we cut to her with no reason given. Sometimes the story switches protagonist because someone in the current storyline mentions one of the others, and other times it switches because of a chapter break. And then in the last chapter, we start out with a storyteller who's apparently telling the story we're reading to a group of kids 100 years in the future. And after that, just in this section, Geralt keeps flashing back to his own story in a linear fashion. None of these approaches make the story harder to read or to understand, but they kind of feel pointless and unnecessary. On the brighter side, now that we're 3 novels in, Sapkowski seems to be more comfortable with writing long-form stories. Like I said, Geralt's story takes up the majority of the book, and while you can divide his story into smaller episodes, they all flow together much more smoothly than what we saw in the previous novels. But, to bring up another criticism, a lot of the dialogue in the book is sardonic, sarcastic, or mocking. There's certainly a lot to be sarcastic about, especially since all three protagonists are at a low point after the fiasco at Threadbare. But it still gets kind of tiresome when everybody talks around what they really want to say. I'll admit that Regis is a breath of fresh air in this regard, at least compared to the rest, and it's a nice moment when he and Geralt's other companions call him out for being a brooding anti-hero, but Regis is also a pompous windbag, and so he's also got his own issues with communication. Overall, though, I'd say Baptism of Fire isn't as good as The Time of Contempt, but it's an effective follow-up that continues the story and introduces some especially memorable characters. Geralt's companions in particular are an interesting bunch, and so it's no wonder that the game series uses them as often as they can. The analysis. A baptism is a kind of rebirth. You are born once, and then you are born again when you rise out of the water and into the light of Christ. A baptism of fire is similar, but instead of immersing yourself in something motherly and comforting like water, you immerse yourself in fire, something dangerous and consuming, but which is also cleansing and purifying. The fire does not enlighten, even if it is quite bright, so much as it strengthens and simplifies. Those who are born again in fire are stronger for having suffered. Thus, the title of the novel is also its primary theme. The struggle that Geralt goes through to cross the Yaruga isn't a pointless waste of time. It's something Geralt needs, something that lets him refocus and regain confidence in himself and in his beliefs after his defeat on Threadbare. He starts the book grim and broody, insisting that this is his fight alone, only he needs to risk his life, only he can complete this quest. He allows his companions to join him, but only with the greatest reluctance, only after they insist and stick with him, after Geralt tries repeatedly to get them to leave. However, over the course of the book, Geralt realizes that he's not the only one who needs to prove himself, who needs to atone for past mistakes. Milva is pregnant and wants an abortion, and she sees helping Geralt find his daughter as a way to balance the scales. Cahir wants to help Ciri even if he doesn't bring her back to Nilfgaard because he couldn't help her at Threadbare, just like Geralt. Zoltan and his crew stole from a traveling merchant, and so they try to make up for it by helping refugees. Regis drank a lot of blood in his youth, so much so that he became the vampire version of an alcoholic, and after he got clean he decided to help the humans that he once preyed upon. And as for Dandelion, he isn't trying to atone for anything specific, but he is trying to prove his bravery by getting closer to the front lines of a war than any unarmed troubadour ever should. Thanks for joining me again for today's Threadbare review, and I hope I'll see you next time. Until then, please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and if you have a little extra money to spare, you can support me on Patreon. Link in the description.